Hello. Thanks everyone for joining. Today's webinar is all about the SOP advantage and how to build a culture of documentation with your MSP. So just to kick things off, my name is Patrick Albert, VP of Product Management at Auvik Networks, and I'll be your host today. I'm super excited to bring on and welcome Nigel Moore to discuss his experiences in transforming his culture at his previous MSP. Before we go ahead and get started, those of you that aren't familiar with Auvik, let me just give you a really quick rundown that will let Nigel take over here. Auvik is a network management solution designed specifically for MSPs. We're 100% channel focused, headquartered in Waterloo, Canada, about an hour just outside of Toronto. So very, very cold right now, so slowly getting warm. Our solution is all about helping MSPs perform very deep network monitoring, augmenting their existing remote monitoring solution, helping MSPs automate the active topologies and bringing in network maps, and also backing up network configurations. Well, so I mentioned that we're really excited to bring Nigel on today, and I'm sure, at the very beginning of every webinar, you always hear that. So let me just give you a bit of context as to why today. So Auvik produces frequent podcasts for MSPs where we bring in both MSP experts and also just general industry experts that can bring in some additional really interesting insight. We brought Nigel on last December, I believe it was, for one, and we had just amazing rave reviews. And people wanted a lot more depth. So we covered some great content, but I think we really wanted to dive deeper here. So we figured we bring him in and do a good deep dive on specifically on the culture aspect, which is what Nigel will go into today. If you haven't checked it out, I'd strongly suggest listening to some of our podcasts. You can either do that by searching Frankly MSP, one word, in your favorite podcast app, or by going to auvik.com/franklymsp. And last thing before I pass it off to Nigel here, just before we get started, I just wanted to mention that we'll also be recording today's webinar, and we can send out the link afterwards. And I'll also be doing a Q&A session at the end, and Nigel and I will stick around for that. And Nigel apparently gets some really good questions, so definitely strongly suggest sticking around for that part. But I'll also be watching the Q&As throughout the webinar, so feel free to submit questions as you get them. And if there's one that's better suited to interrupt Nigel, I'm all about keeping him on his toes and throwing it in at him. So with that, Nigel, I'll welcome you on and go ahead and get started.
Thank you very much. So I've got a little bit to live up to here after that intro. I will do my very best. Hello, everyone. I can see we've got some Tech Tribe members on here, which is great. I just saw Tony, you log in as well. So welcome, Tony, and welcome to everybody who hasn't met me before. My name is Nigel, and I live out here in sunny Australia. Just behind those windows here is the beach, which I've just been out for a swim on to make you all a little bit jealous. But what I'm going to do today is we've called this webinar the SOP Advantage. And as Patrick mentioned, I jumped on the podcast with Jennifer, or it was probably December time, and they got a load of good feedback. I shared a little bit of our story and our business. And so today I'm going to run through a little bit more of that. So let's kick it off. My name's Nigel, and I'm addicted to plastic surgery. And what I mean by that is this was me when Jennifer asked me to present. I was like, yeah, no problems. I'll be able to do that. No dramas. Then they told me their rego numbers, and they said, we've got maybe 500 people now. And I went, geez, I haven't presented to that many people before. And right now we've already got 125 people on the line, which is really cool. So hello, 125 of you. Normally I'm presenting to my Tech Tribe, and normally we've only got maybe 30 or 40 people on board. So here we go. This is our chance to 4X it already, which is cool. However, this was me on Saturday lunchtime, and I was trying to be too school for cool, and I was out riding a friend's skateboard, and I fell off, and I ended up, I hurt my arm, and I landed on this hand, and this hand is the hand that I type with really fast. And Saturday afternoon, my wife and kids were out, and I was planning on sorting out the slide deck for this and finishing it all up and just running through a couple of fine keeping things. But instead, I spent the whole of Saturday up in the emergency department getting x-rays on my hand, which is thankfully not broken and back to normal. But it meant that yesterday I had to scramble and get this slide deck together. And so it's the first time we're trying this. We're trying a new platform, Zoom, here to see how the webinar works as well. So we may hammer in a screw. We may try and wrench around a nail. Bear with us. If you do notice anything strange, throw it in the chat box. Patrick's watching there, and we will try our best to figure it out. So to get started, I've got two requests. Number one, I've got a little bit of a crazy fast Aussie accent, and I am not going to apologize for that. I'm going to say that and one of my friends recently was running a webinar and someone jumped on the webinar, and he's like me, he actually speaks faster than me. And someone jumped on the webinar and goes, "Can you please slow down? This is ridiculous." And his response was, "Can you just listen faster?" And so my encouragement is, if I'm a little bit too slow, maybe turn your phones on silent and get Facebook off your other screens and listen faster, in all love and respect. Secondly, my second request is, don't be butt face in this. And you know what butt face is like? Whenever you're trying to give somebody advice or tips or recommendations or something, and they're coming back and they're saying, "But this won't work for me," or "But this does that," or "But it's not going to work," or "But." And so my encouragement here is, you may know some of this stuff. Some of this stuff may not work in your business. That's cool. But just don't be butt face. Take those butt face glasses off, and let's try and all learn a little bit here. Hopefully I'll be able to learn from some questions as well in here, and let's get a whole lot out of it. So after all that plastic surgery, this is really me. I have been in the IT support industry since 2003, and I've been in the technology industry since 1998. However, I've been a geek since I was born. And if anybody recognizes this thing, a lot of you out there, I'm sure, have used a Commodore 64. That was what I first learned to code on. And when my friends were out riding BMX bikes and riding on their skateboards, I was in my bedroom learning how to code on this thing. And if I was out riding my skateboard, I probably wouldn't have fallen off this weekend and hurt myself. So my story started in that I was working for an MSP from about 2003 to about 2008. And I was kind of running the place for the guy. He had moved across to another state. And I inherited a pile of clients out of that business and started my first MSP, which was called More Technology, which you see the logo for there. Over a few years, we went through a whole pile of different changes and whatnot. And eventually in 2014, we merged with another company, and we created a bigger company called Vision 3. And in 2016, we sold that bigger MSP. And we weren't large. We were 10 people when we sold. So we were kind of we were just doing shy of $1.5 million in revenue. So we weren't large, we weren't small. We were kind of just in the middle. And we sold that in 2016 with a fairly successful sale in terms of deal structure. And so over that time, I've done a couple of things right, but I've done a hell of a lot more things wrong. And I'm not afraid to admit it. And so today, it's all about learning from my mistakes. And what I want to do is I want to kick off with the first thing. And I want to kick off and just give you guys a little bit of inspiration about the industry. And for me, I talk to hundreds and hundreds of MSPs all around the place. And the second most asked question I get asked is, what is the future of the IT support industry? Where do you see it going, or what do you see happening with it? And stick around, because I'll tell you at the end what the most asked question is. I'm going to give you a little guide at the end of it, or a little tool that's going to help you solve the most asked question. But stick around to the end, a little bit of a stick and encouragement for you to hang around, or a bribe if you'd like to hang around to the end. But in terms of the most asked question, what is the future of the IT support industry? I honestly see it as a perfect storm. And this little photo here was taken from my balcony out the front. As you can see, just outside these windows here is the Pacific Ocean. And you can see out here in Australia, we have these cool things called half cars, where they don't have the bonnet of the car. And so you can drive around, and you don't need an engine in these things. Reality is that there's a panoramic thing on my camera not working very well. But reality is, right now, we've got this perfect storm. You've got access to these amazing platforms out there. You've got Office 365 and G Suite, which are light years ahead of anything that's ever existed in the marketplace. They are amazing foundations for you to be able to build businesses on. And the great thing about these is you get your weekends and evenings back. There's no more failed exchange patches and server blue screens and whatnot on weekends that you have to worry about getting things on. So you've got access to these amazing platforms. Secondly, you've got these amazing tools, and tools like Autotask and ConnectWise and Harmony PSA and documentation tools like IT Glue. These tools are all extremely mature tools nowadays. And let's not forget Orvik. We are on an Orvik webinar, so I do have to shamelessly promote them a little bit in there. But you've got access to these amazing tools. But the perfect storm exists most importantly because of this. Your clients are getting screamed and yelled at by all of these vendors and all of these tools out there to come and buy my product. There is so much technology out there now, and so many different ways that they can go and skin their IT and infrastructure cat, that they're drowning. And this is typically what most end users are like. They're looking at the marketplace and hearing all of this messaging from a million different spots in their Facebook ads and their Google ads, and they're more confused than ever. And in times of confusion, that's when opportunity exists for people like you and us and MSPs to be able to pull your clients out of that confusion and make things simple for them with the amazing tools that they've got access to. And ultimately, your clients, they just want to focus on their genius. They just want to be lawyers and accountants and doctors and dentists and whatever it is that they do. They don't want to be IT people. They want to be able to have an IT partner in there that they can trust, that can simplify everything for them and cut out all the complexity so that they can just focus on what they want to do. Because if you're anything like me, you love technology and that's your genius. But your clients, they're lawyers and they're accountants and that's their genius. So that's what they want to do and they need you to guide them. So the opportunity that exists at the moment is, number one, providing awesome support and service to clients. There's no two ways about that, and you should be doing that anyway. But number two, empowering them with education, empowering them with how to get the most out of these tools and how to be able to use the technology platforms that they've got to be able to get more into their business and to be able to make their business more efficient and more profitable, and maybe even to be able to make it more a better environment or a more fun culture in terms of their environment. And what you need to do in here, with, as I said, with all of that complexity and those tools out there, you need to be able to provide powerful simplicity for your clients. You need to be able to cut through all of that stuff that's out there and reduce it down into something that your clients can really easily understand and grasp, so that they're not drowning in the sea of technology and the sea of all these choices that are out there for them. And you've probably heard a couple of different people out in the MSP world talk about MSP 2.0 and what's MSP version 2 and what's MSP version 3. I call this my MSP version 55 because all those numbers are arbitrary. It doesn't matter. All it means is that we're just progressing and we're evolving as an industry. And so the way I see it is we still need to provide that awesome support, but now we need to really focus on empowering education and providing really powerful simplicity for our clients. Now, a few people ask me, if you have that much belief in the MSP industry, why aren't you still running your MSP? And that's a fair question. So I've had another facelift here, and this just goes to show you, I had this little thing sitting on my shoulder, at least for the last couple of years when I was running my MSP, saying, Nigel, you've got to be doing something else. This is fun, but there's more out there for you. And I started helping out a couple of other MSPs that were friends in the industry on the side, teaching them a few things about what we were doing in our MSP. And I kind of realized at that point that I loved doing that a whole lot more than I loved running my MSP. And so the writing eventually came on the wall, and it got to the point where I decided to sell the MSP and let that little voice on my head take over and say, okay, now you can go and run out into the world and go and help other MSPs. So that's why I did it. And that's my last facelift, I think. Maybe there's another slide in there where I do another one. So let's dive in. Today is about the SOP advantage, and we're going to be talking about my story. But first off, I want to talk a little bit about why to document. Why should we create SOPs? And there's a couple of points that I'm going to run through. The first one, and a lot of these, you're going to think that makes sense. It makes complete sense. Or you're going to know it already. That's cool. And this might just be a little bit of confirmation for you. But first up, it gets you a higher business valuation. And the reason that happens is that typically in the MSP world, you've got two types of business sales. You've got a financial sale or a strategic sale. And a financial sale, business owners are just looking to buy your book of clients. They're just looking for the revenue. They're not looking for anything else outside of that. They're just looking for the revenue. However, if you sell your MSP and you've got a really great asset of all of your SOPs and your way of doing things and checklists, that can really add on top of that financial sale. So you can get a much better price and a much better deal structure out of any potential sale. And let's face it, at some stage in the future, every single one of you is going to have to leave your MSP, whether it's in a box, whether it's you have to shut the doors, or whether it's via some sort of successful sale. It's going to have to happen one day. So you might as well put this stuff in place to make sure that you get the best out of it when that time comes. Next up, you can have real holidays. I remember the first 4 or 5 years of my MSP, I didn't have a single holiday, and I'd be lucky if I took weekends away. Once I finally get it SOPs and the right people in place, I was able to take off sometimes for 5 weeks at a time without using my mobile phone whatsoever. And so ultimately you can have real holidays. Next up, you can scale with quality and reduce rework. And that is a very important point, because rework in an MSP not only affects you internally because it costs you more, but it affects your clients because your clients are having to come back to you and say, hey, this wasn't finished or this isn't working or whatnot. So it reduces that. Most importantly, second most importantly, you can work on the fun stuff. When you kind of get all the basic stuff out of your head and into an SOP, you can free your brain up a little bit to go and focus on the fun stuff, learning new technology, figuring out how you can roll out new products and services to your clients, figuring out how you can go deeper into your clients to be able to do higher level work. But the most important point of all, and this was the most important point in our business, is that we can we can finally get great at doing things rather than just good. And so in our MSP for many years, we were good at what we did. We used to be able to do migrations and roll out new PCs and do all the things that an MSP does. And we were okay to good at it, but not until we got all of the basic stuff out of our head and into an SOP were we able to then look at those SOPs and then go, okay, well, now we've got the brain space to be able to say, okay, what can we put in this SOP? What little steps can we put in this SOP now to actually make the service we deliver to our clients amazing, not just good? Because amazing is what sets you apart from everybody else. And amazing is what gets your clients talking to their friends about you. And a little example of that is and this is something you might already be doing, but it might also give you a little bit of inspiration, is that in our MSP, we used to have one of the most common things you do is set up new computers. And so we used to roll out new computers, and we had it all in our heads about how we'd roll it out. And we used to roll it out, and every now and then we'd forget a printer driver, or we'd forget some AV or whatever it is. And that was rework. That cost us money. And so we got all of that basic stuff out of our heads into a checklist. And that first round of the checklist might have only had 10 points on it. But over the next year or so, we continually improved that checklist to the point where it was an amazing experience for our clients when they got a new PC. And even the little things that you put in it are what make the difference. And one of those little things that we used to have in our little checklist was we had these little nice cards printed out, and we had some chocolates that we provided. And don't ask my team, but most of those chocolates, I ate them myself when they were sitting in our office. But what we used to do was, one of the steps in our checklist was, whenever you're taking a new PC out to a client, make sure you go and handwrite on one of the new PC cards and go and grab a chocolate and put it on it. And then when you deliver it on their desk, leave the little chocolate in there saying, hey, I hope you enjoy your new PC. If you've got any questions or whatever, reach out. And that was a handwritten thing from the engineer that installed it. And it's those tiny little tidbits that separate you from everybody else out there. And that might not seem much, but when you're trying to remember all of the stuff in your head about trying to install printer drivers and AV and whatnot, you can't typically think about those other cool things that make your client's experience the best. So the most important point, as I said, is you can get great at things instead of just good. Now, my big mistake in trying to roll out SOPs, my journey kind of started like this. I read E-Myth. Who out of there has read E-Myth? I'm sure a lot of you have read the E-Myth. It's kind of the MSP Bible. So I read that. It took me 3 hours. I then decided, I then spent time deciding on the tech. That took me probably about 3 months. And that was because I was looking at all the different types of tech, trying to figure out what's going to work. Then I procrastinated for no doubt 8 weeks, probably longer. Then I installed SharePoint on premises, which took me a couple of weeks of figuring around and getting a server in place and buying some extra drives for the server. Then I procrastinated again for probably another 8 weeks. Then I decided to create the world's best Word document template for us to put our SOPs in. And this thing linked with everything and created things and pulled data in and did all this kinds of stuff. And then I procrastinated again for about another 8 weeks. Then I probably created my first SOP. And that probably took me a week to roll the thing out because I wanted it to be perfect. And then I probably used my first SOP never. And that was my big mistake. That's kind of how my SOP journey started. And I don't know if any of you can resonate with that. That's probably mine. It actually probably went even longer than that. I don't like to admit it, but it probably did. But the result was that in 12 months' time, we had 3 crappy SOPs sitting in our on-prem SharePoint box that was running the world's best Word document template. But things ultimately changed. And eventually, when we sold the MSP, we had over 1,000 SOP entries in our SOP database. And the problem was that, here's another facelift one, is that this was me. I was sitting at the top of our business with my glasses on, barking orders at everybody. I was there saying, this is how we're going to do it. SOPs have to be done this way, and this is how you have to do it. And if you're not going to do it, I'm going to scream at you. I'm going to bark at you. And then I read this book. You may have watched his TED Talk. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to go and look for it. His name is Simon Sinek, and he's got a TED Talk talking about the reason why people do things. And it really instilled in me that I need to think at a different level than rather than just barking orders at people. I need to figure out the why and get people involved at the why level to get them engaged. But then I also read this book, The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, and that really helped me kick off my journey. And I'm going to share a story that's in it about a plane called the Boeing 299. And now this plane, back in, I think it was about 1935, it was due to be shown at an air show for next generation bombers ready for the wars, and took off on its maiden voyage, and everybody was around watching it. And about 300 feet into the air, it fell into the ground and killed 2 of the 5 people, which you see what happened here. And what ended up happening, they went through and did all the analysis on the plane and tried to figure out, and they couldn't figure out, there was no problem with any part of the plane. And what ultimately happened was that they decided, or they came to the realization that the plane had become too much for anyone to fly. And this was the first time in history that that had happened, that people couldn't fly a plane without some sort of assistance. And so what happened in here is the Army went ahead, even after the crash, the Army went ahead and ordered a few of them. And what they did was they realized that what had happened is the pilot of the plane, who was one of the world's most experienced pilots at the time, had forgotten to pull off one of the rudder brakes. And that's what caused the plane to crash. And the reason he did that was because there were so many things to remember in this new plane and this new technology that the human brain could not keep up. They'd kind of got to the point where the human brain just did not have the capacity to remember all of these steps. And so the Army put in a checklist. They put in a checklist with just, I think it was only maybe 8 to 10 different steps, or maybe 15 different steps, just so that people that were flying the planes could remember every single thing that happened. And what happened is, oh, sorry, jumping backwards and forwards. What happens is they put in that checklist, and then they flew nearly 2 million miles without a single incident. And they went ahead and ultimately ordered 13,000 of those planes. And that plane, this old little Boeing 299 here, drastically changed the outcome of the war. And a lot of it, no doubt, came down to them realizing that they've gone beyond the human capacity to remember what's got to happen in this higher level of technology. And they ended up just putting in a simple checklist. And that's what it is. It allowed them to be able to operate at a higher level. And so that little story kind of kicked it off for me in that this is our new Boeing 299s. Technology now is at the point where it's impossible for us to be able to keep all this stuff in our heads and do a good job and not crash the plane. And so we have to realize that we've got to get this stuff out of our heads and into documents or into SOPs or into whatever tool you use to be able to operate at that high level and to be able to provide that amazing service that we all want to provide to our clients. So what do we need to be able to do it? So we need all three of these. Number one is you need simple tools. There's no point going and creating that crazy SharePoint on-prem thing that I did with the world-class Microsoft Word documents, because ultimately you're not going to use it, just like we did. We didn't use it. But secondly, you need a supportive culture. And this ties in with that Simon Sinek book, The Start With Why. And I'll run through this a little bit in a minute, in that if you don't have a supportive culture, it's going to be really, really, really hard for you to be able to embed SOPs into your business. And next up, you need easy guidelines. You don't want to have rules that you bark out to everybody. Guidelines work really, really well. And you want to have some guidelines that help you be able to implement this into your culture and to ultimately get the best out of it. And right in the middle, that's where the magic lies. So how do we do it? So right now, I'm going to share with you 5 hot principles that helped us and that I see a lot of other MSPs implementing nowadays after I have been teaching and coaching them how to do it. And they're starting to have some really good results out of it. So the number one, the most underlying principle that you have to have in place, and this is where I failed miserably, is you have to get your team on board. You want to solve it with them, not for them. And ultimately, I got to that point where we tried all of those things and SOPs just weren't working. And I ended up getting all of our team in a boardroom. And I said, guys, we've got this documentation problem. We're crap at it. And I've tried, and I realized that I'm the problem because I'm not leading you guys the right way. So let's, as a team, try and solve this together. And I'll run through a little bit of how we got through that. But ultimately, I believe this one thing here, solving the problem with my team, not for them, is the one needle that moved the whole SOP thing for us the most. And next up, when you're getting your team on board, you need to lead from the top. I probably created by hand the first 50 to 100 SOPs just to be able to lead by example and to try and get into the culture that I'm not just barking orders at you guys. I'm starting from the ground up, and I am in the trenches beside you guys doing it. And when I was helping get the team on board or trying to get the team on board, I even had to try a little bit of bribery. And so one of the things we did was we used to buy big chunks of movie tickets, and every time we saw someone roll out a great SOP or even just improve one in a certain way or whatnot, we'd go and publicly give them the movie tickets and say, hey, great job doing that. I can really see that it's really helping us be able to grow the business to the next level and be able to provide that amazing service that we want to provide our clients. So I had to do a little bit of bribery in there to kickstart it. And when we did that publicly, the rest of the team in the office saw that that was happening. They go, oh, maybe I can get some movie tickets out of this as well. So a little bit of bribery. I don't know if that works in your business. It might not. You might have a different culture. So maybe movie tickets won't work. Maybe you need something else, but that might be one thing that can help. Next up, we had to install Kaizen into our company core values. And Kaizen, if you haven't heard of it, is the Japanese theory of continual improvement, continual incremental improvements. And so at every opportunity, we were always talking about that our company was always continually incrementally improving. And so every single day or every single week and every single month, we were slowly adding these little 2, 3, 4-minute tidbits of improvement to our company and to our processes that over time became these amazing, amazing changes in the business. So we installed that Kaizen into our core values. And as I said, getting your team on board, this is the most important step. Getting them in the room if you've got to, even if you're a larger MSP and you've got some stakeholders in it, you don't have to get your whole team in, just get your stakeholders in. If you're a one-man band, get yourself in a room somewhere. That's okay. Get yourself in a room and just work on solving the problem with yourself. Figure out why it's not working for you and why you need to put SOPs in your system. And as I said, that Simon Sinek book can really help you figure out the why platform there. And so this was our team. This was one of our days in our boardroom. This was some of us. We were filling our bellies with food and solving problems together. And we solved a lot of problems together in that boardroom. And what we used to do, it used to be Friday lunches. We used to put on these chicken and chips, which probably is not the most healthiest way to look after your staff. We used to put on this chicken and chips and we'd all get in the boardroom and we'd solve problems together. And those problems that we solved together, our team was 1,000 times more engaged in the outcome of those problems and dealing with those solutions than they were when I was originally trying to just bark orders at them. So first up, get your team involved in the problem and get your team on board. Secondly, choose your tool. Now, there is some amazing tools out in the marketplace here. You've probably no doubt heard of IT Glue because it's kind of the Rolls Royce of the industry at the moment. There's BizDocs, there's SI Portal, Stellar. There's some generic ones. We used to use Confluence because some of these other tools didn't exist when we started our journey. Process Street, System Hub, IT Boost. There is a ton of different tools out there. So number 2, you have to choose your tool. And when you're choosing your tool, ask yourself some due diligence questions. And here's a couple that I've pulled out of one of the checklists that we've got in our Tech Tribe. And these are just some of the questions you need to ask yourself to make sure that you're choosing the right tool for your business. And I won't read them all out to you here because I know we're probably already a little bit behind time. I'm trying to speak as fast as I can and get through the slides as quick as I can. So number 2, choose your tool. When you're choosing your tool, don't do what I did and spend months and months and months doing it. Set a decision deadline and stick with it. And what will happen if you don't is that you will always find more information. You can always find more information to try and help you with your decision. But if you don't set a decision deadline, you'll never make that decision because you'll always be going, oh, but if I just know this little bit, or if I just try and figure out that, or if I just try and figure out this. So set a decision deadline that maybe it's next Friday, 5 p.m. close of business. With whatever information you have at that particular point in time, you are going to make your decision then, no matter what. So set yourself a decision deadline when you're choosing your tool. Number 3, set the structures. So set your structures of how you want your SOPs to be outlined. And here, this is how we used to have ours. We used to call our system our brains. And in there, we broke it into 3 separate sections. We had our sales and marketing section where all our business growth stuff was. We had our service delivery section where all our client checklists and our SOPs for rolling out new computers and all that kind of stuff was. And then we had our finance and admin and operations section. And that's where all the back end of our business was, where all the back end ninjas did all their work. That was where all that stuff was. And that structure there was based and born out of a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. Now, if you haven't read that book yet, as a side note, go and grab it. Listen to it on your Kindle if you've got to, or listen to it on Audible, if you have to, or go and grab it on your Kindle. It's a great book and it runs through breaking your business down into these 3 key areas and figuring out different ways of how to manage your business at that level. Then set the structure for how you like your SOPs to look. And now I'm a simple kind of guy. I love stuff with simplicity. And so I see too many people out there create their SOPs and go, okay, for every SOP, we have to have these 12 different pieces of the framework. We have to have our linked SOPs and our whys and our whats and our everything in there. Honestly, 95% of SOPs don't need that stuff in them, at least to get started with. You can go and add that stuff down the track. But to get started with, what you really need is the checklist, right? Maybe 1 or 2 sentences up the top about why this one exists, and then the checklist. Down the track, you can go and add all that more important stuff, the version history and the controls and all of this kind of stuff. For now, just get started with the basics. So you've got to set your structures and your basics in there. Next up, you need to craft your guidelines so you and your team know the kind of frameworks to operate in. And you've got these tools handy to you to be able to help you roll this stuff out a little bit quicker and a little bit better. Number one, the first SOP should be how to write an SOP. And so that was our first SOP in our business, is how to write an SOP. And we had in there just the basic ways for where it should be stored, how it should be structured, and how you should, how it should link to other things if we've got to and whatnot. And that one, it might have only been a page and a half, and it might have taken 15 minutes for me to create in the first place. But that's an important one, because whenever anybody is at least getting started creating SOPs, you just need to have the basics of how to do it. Next up, this is one of the things that we embedded into our culture with part of that Kaizen theory that I was talking about. And that is that at any one time in our business, everyone on our team should be either adding an SOP into the system, improving an existing SOP, or following an SOP. They're the three rules. And sure, we weren't 100% of it. I'm going to say we were probably 80 to 85% of it. We were probably 80 to 85% doing this, but that is good. That is good enough. That is better than 0%. And you don't have to be 80%. You can be 50% at doing the add, improve, follow. You don't have to be, it doesn't have to be something that you do in every single thing you do. But if you have it as part of your culture, you do it in a lot of what you do, and ultimately you get really, really good at it. And that improvement part in there, that improve in the middle, is one of the most important steps. And what we used to do for that is, as anybody's running through an SOP in the business, they should always be looking for opportunity of where they can improve it. And anywhere in there that they can maybe make the client experience a little bit better, or they can make it a little bit more efficient from our side. They're always looking for opportunities to improve it. And those improvements may only take 30 seconds to add to the SOP at the end of when they run through it. Next up, and this is a big one for people that look at rolling out SOPs in their business, and you go, holy crap, that is a big elephant to bite off. There is 1,000 different processes in my business. How on earth am I going to roll out and create an SOP for all of these? And if you've got a team of people, you go, well, I've got to build SOPs for all of these teams and all of these people and whatnot. My encouragement there is that you don't need to do it all. And so I used to use this framework here, the me, us, you method. And what that was is that whenever I was handing, and let's face it, in my business, when I first started, it was all in my head. The whole business was in my head. And as we grew, it still was in my head. And we had a team, we had 3, 4, 5 people, and it was still in my head. So what I had to do is I ran through this me, us, you method, in that I would go through a process with someone, and they would sit beside me, or they would sit on a Zoom call or a Skype call with me, and we would go through the process, and I would do it. I would read out exactly what I'm doing, and maybe it's setting up a new Office 365 tenant or whatever it was. I would go through the process with me doing it 100%, with them watching and them taking notes and them recording. Then they would need to go away and they would create the SOP. So the onus wasn't on me to go and create this big SOP in this document. Then the next time that process came about, we would go through it together. So I would sit on the Zoom call, or I would sit beside them, and we'd go through that process together with them sitting beside me, but they would lead it that time. They would lead it and they'd go through the process, and I would provide input. And I would say, okay, how about we tweak this a little bit here, or no, you just missed this step here, or if you do it this way, it's going to change it. And that was kind of that was getting our draft into kind of the final version. The next time around, it's up to you. We've gone through it together. We've created it. You've created it. We've tweaked it and tuned it. Next time around, it's over to you. And I don't need to be involved from next time around. So that's my encouragement, is you don't need to do it all. You can just go through it once without having to document it. You can just go through and show somebody that's on your team, because let's face it, you are probably not the most, the best person to be documenting in your business everything, because you're probably the most expensive resource in your business. And you probably should be focusing more on sales and marketing and growth related activities and team building activities, rather than spending your time building out all these SOPs. So my encouragement there is you don't have to do it all yourself. We used to have this second mistake kind of rule or thing in our business. And I think it's probably from some sort of proverb or quote back in the day. Confucius probably said it, in that you make a mistake once and it's a lesson. And I had no problems with our team making mistakes once. The only way we learn is from making mistakes. And as long as we learn from it, it was fine. But if you make a mistake twice, that's a choice. You've decided to make that mistake twice because you didn't learn from the first time around. And choices like that have consequences. And we always had that in our culture. And it was kind of let's call it an idle threat, but it wasn't really. But it was kind of this thing that hung over everybody's head, that we don't want to, as a business, make the same mistake twice, because you make the same mistake twice and it kind of makes a fool out of us. It means that we're not really doing what we should be doing. So our rule was always to make a mistake once. That's cool. Got no problems making a mistake once, but don't ever make the mistake a second time. Whenever you make a mistake, figure out what you can tweak, change, adjust, or add into your SOP system to make sure that that mistake never happens again. Next up, keep it freaking super simple. And this is a G-rated webinar, so I couldn't use another word in there, but keep it super simple, because if you try and overcomplicate rolling out your SOPs and you try and create that SharePoint on-prem thing where I had with all these linked Word documents and whatnot, nobody will use it. Nobody will use it whatsoever. And especially yourself, because you look at it and go, it's so much work to get in there and try and do this stuff. And so my encouragement there is do whatever you can to pull out all the complexity. And there's lots of, you see all these different systems out there that put in all this complexity into things. Pull it all out, get it out of there, and just start with the basics. Because once you've got the basics in place, then if you really need to, you can then add complexity on top of it to be able to maybe help you grow to the next level. But please do not start with any complexity in there. Next up, take advantage of video. Video is a really great way for you to save time if you've got a process that, in our business, we had a particular example of the way that we used to quote fixed fee projects using our quoting system, which was QuoteWorks plugged into ConnectWise. And there was a whole lot of moving parts in that. And I came up with a process originally, and it was quite a complicated process. And so I went, there's no way on earth I'm going to document this process. And so all I did was I recorded a quick 5-minute video using Jing, which is a free 5-minute video recorder. And I put it in there. And from then on, the admin team, whenever they needed to follow that process, could just watch that video and follow along with the bouncing ball as they went through that process. And it worked really, really well. We've got things, my iPhone's underneath the table now, it's turned off, but we've got our iPhone. Even if you record an SOP on your iPhone, that is cool. It's just, video makes a lot of sense in working with SOPs because it allows you to get that stuff out just that little bit faster. And sometimes it allows you to give a little bit more context to it as well. Next up, we had the 95 guideline. And what I mean by this is that 90% of the work that you do in your business has some sort of area in it that can potentially be improved. And so maybe you're working through maybe you're a tech and you're working through your new computer checklist and you're going through it and you're going, I found this cool little step that we could put in here. And that's going to improve it for next time around. So our rule here was that in 90% of the stuff that we do in, day out in our business, we can probably spend 2 to 5 minutes at the end of working on that particular task to improve ourselves as a business. We don't have to spend hours at the end of it, or even half an hour, or even 20 minutes, or even 10 minutes. We're going to spend 2 to 5 minutes at the end of that particular task to improve it. And so my encouragement there is 90% of the things that your team and your techs and you are working on can, if you spend 2 minutes at the end of it, be improved so that next time you go through them, they're going to be just that little bit better. And that's that Kaizen theory working. Next up, and this ties into a lot of those points before, is set your security. Obviously, we're in a game where things like passwords and whatnot, password security and things like that matter a lot. And so there's certain SOPs that you have to lead from the top and you have to say, this is how we deal with our security. This one doesn't get changed. We store our passwords here. Passwords are created in this particular way, et cetera, et cetera. These SOPs don't get changed. So you just need to make sure that you get your security right. But in our business, 90% of our SOPs, 95% of our SOPs could be edited and improved on by all of our team, by anybody in our team. And what I said in my business and the mantra that I had in my business is that if I couldn't let my team do that, then I've probably hired the wrong people. And what I mean, and I think you probably get what that means, but what I mean by that is that if my team can't improve my business, then what are they, then it's just left up to me to be able to do it. And ultimately, I'm not going to be able to scale and grow a business if every single thing has to come back to me. So set your security around things like passwords and the kind of tight security stuff. But for the rest of it, let your team and hire the right people and have the right people on your team to be able to go and improve things without you having to be involved and without having to go through high-level, multi-level approval processes and whatnot. And sure, as you get into the 50, 100, 200, 500 seat MSPs, you're going to have to tighten some of that up a little bit more. But for the majority of us in the sub 20, 30 seat MSP market, your team should be improving these processes for you in every area of the business, apart from, as I said, security. And make it an octopus head. Make your SOP system an octopus head in that it's the central source of information. And then it has all its little feet and arms pointing off to all the other things. So you might have a PSA that's got some stuff in configurations and whatnot. You might have your documentation system. You might have some Word documents somewhere. You might have some OneNote stuff. But make sure that you've just got the one octopus head that is the central store that so people know that they need to go there first. And that octopus head then leads down the arms to all the other ones. Don't have it so they have to go and try and look here first and then over here and then try and find this up here and blah, blah, blah. Link all from one spot. So that's some guidelines just to hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration of how to get some of this SOP kind of culture embedded into your business. Next up, use some gamification. Get your team maybe even competing and arguing with each other. And in our business, we used to use Confluence because tools like IT Glue and whatnot didn't exist back then. And in Confluence, we used to be able to have it so that we could see who had created the most SOPs in the business and who had edited and updated and improved them. And so we had that as a dashboard of our SOP system. And we actually ended up having some healthy competition between our techs as to who could create the most, because they always wanted to be the one that was leading the way. And nowadays, you've got access to these cool dashboards like this. This is a dashboard out of BrightGauge that plugs into tools like IT Glue and your ticketing system and whatnot to be able to pull out things like documents created and documents updated and SOPs updated so that you can have a little bit of healthy competition between your team. Because especially techs, if you're a tech like me, we love competing a little bit against each other. So use gamifications. Next up, some final tips to run through just to give you a couple of little more quick tidbits and thoughts and ideas. Number one, and this came from one of the members of our tech tribe, a guy called Jared, who's running a great MSP out here in Australia. He used to have these doc smash sessions, they used to call them, where at nighttime they used to get their whole team in, they'd have a little bit of fun, they'd order in some pizza or some food or whatnot, and they'd compete to see who could roll out the most, who could get the most things documented in, say, their IT Glue, or who could get their most SOPs rolled out through the night. And they'd have these kind of nighttime ones. And you might think that that's a little bit not fun. And I agree, but with anything like this, you can make it fun. It's all the stuff around the outside of it that makes it fun. Maybe you've got some gaming sessions that happen in between, or maybe you order in some amazing cool food or whatever it is. Maybe figure out a way that you can create these doc smash sessions in there or whatever you want to call them. The other one that you should be doing is constantly asking, is that documented, or is that in our brain system, or is that in our SOP system? And for the first many months, that was probably the most commonly uttered phrase out of my vocabulary to my team is that in our brains? Have you documented that? Have you got that in the checklist? Did you improve this? And ultimately, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen over 1 week, but ultimately over time, it started embedding into the culture of our people. And what I loved, and this is when I knew it was working really, really well, was that I finally got to the point where I had done something and I had worked on something, and I was telling the team about it. And one of the guys goes, "Has that been documented?" And I went, "Oh, you got me." And I actually hadn't documented it, but my team got me. And that was when I knew that it was embedded in the culture and that we were working and we were improving as a team, and our guys knew the why and they were embedded into the reason why. And as I said, it doesn't happen overnight, it takes time. And it's something that you just got to keep at because it's culture shifts and changes like that are not one of these things that you can stand up the front, bark and order at everybody and then it's shifted like that overnight. It takes time. And you've got to, as I said at the beginning, lead from the top. Another tip is you can set some individual and team goals. Maybe you've got a team goal to get 1,000 things in your IT Glue system. Set that as a team goal and then have a reward for that. So as a team, once we get 1,000 things in our SOP system or in our IT Glue system, we're going to take you away for a weekend go-karting and 10-pin bowling and whatever it is. Set some rewards like that, and you can have them as individual rewards so that once a person gets to maybe 50 things that they've documented, or 100 things or 500 things or whatever it is, maybe they get a weekend away with their family or whatever it is, something that's cool in there. Set some fun little targets that make people want to keep going for it. Because as I said, that's kind of bribery. Sometimes you've got to throw bribery into the mix to get people to do it. But when they get to the point where it's embedded in the culture, that sort of stuff, you don't need to worry about it much, although it is still fun to keep it going in there. As I said, this is kind of the same as the one before. It's not set and forget. This culture shift is something that continually needs to happen. And I'm harping on it again because it is so incredibly important. I used to think it was set and forget, and I'd throw it out and I'd say, these are our guidelines and that's it. If you're not doing it, you're not doing your job properly. That's not how it works. And if it is, you're running a dictatorship, and that's not how great businesses run nowadays. You need a business built of a team of people that want to do what they do and they enjoy doing what they do and they don't feel like they're monkeys. But we talked about the butt faces at the beginning. So this is for the butt faces out there, which I know none of you on this call are butt faces, but this is, if you happen to have a little bit of a butt in there, this is for you with love, of course. First one, but we don't have time. This is the one that I hear the most, but our team just does not have time to do any documentation. I want to ask you this. Why don't you have time? Really think about that question. Why don't you have time? And I can guarantee that in 95% of cases, it's because you haven't documented in the first place. It's because you're doing all this rework and you're not being efficient in your processes, and you're having to try and remember things, and people are having to search Google every single time they run through a particular process or task. So it's not about not having time. It's about having an efficient use of your time and prioritizing the right things. So if you say we don't have time, my question to you is why you don't have time. Ask yourself and dig deep into that question as to why you don't have time. And I'm sure in 95% of cases, you'll realize that the reason you don't have time is because you're chasing your tail doing all these other things that should have been documented and maybe even got off your plate and given to someone else so that you can focus on those bigger things in your business. But my team won't follow them. That goes right back to that culture thing. Solve the problem with your team and your team will follow them and use them. As soon as I got our team involved in the problem and solving that problem as a company, that's the minute that things changed. Things changed, I'm going to say it was pretty much overnight, but in hindsight, it was probably over the space of a month or 2 or 3 that once we got them involved in solving the problem, they were so much more engaged in the solution. So that's what you need to do. You need to get them involved in the problem. They'll then be engaged in working with the solution. But technology changes too fast. All the more reason. That's the old plane crash. That technology had changed too fast for our human brains and minds to be able to keep up. We'd reached the limit of what our cognitive and the front of our brains could put up with and keep in its short-term memory. And so you have to get all this stuff out of your mind and into these things to keep up with technology changes, to be able to do it. And once technology changes, technology doesn't change like that overnight nowadays. Let's face it, it doesn't change overnight. It does change pretty rapidly. But if you've got that continual Kaizen improvement theory embedded in your business, when technology does change, hopefully you've just got to tweak and adjust a couple of little things in your SOPs then. But don't use that as an excuse not to document. You still should be working, getting these SOPs in place and working on them. And then when things do change, just run with it. Just improve it and adjust it and tweak it. Last but not least, but the tools are too expensive. I hear this one all the time, and it's a bit of a bugbear of mine because these tools, even the Rolls Royce of tools out there, is only a couple of $100s a month. And so what I say to people that are going, oh, it's so expensive, as I say, don't skimp in this area of your business. Go and find somewhere else in your business that you can go and save enough money to be able to pay for the tools that are going to build the foundation of your business and the foundation of getting you out of having to work 80-hour weeks and not go on holidays. Those tools are worth money investing into. And go and find a phone bill that you can cut out, or go to a client and sell them another service that they might need to get that extra couple of $100s a month out of them. Don't scrimp on those tools. Go and find somewhere else in the business to make or save that money. So your next steps, here's some extra reading. I'm not saying go out and read all these tomorrow, but these are some books that you might want to add into your Kindle or your Audible. Checklist Manifesto, as I mentioned, an amazing book. It's really good for helping craft that story to get your team on board. The E-Myth Revisited, we've all heard of that. Built to Sell by John Warrillow. Now, as I said, even if you're not planning on selling your company, if you built it to sell, then if one day you have maybe a sickness or maybe you change your mind or whatever, at least it's going to be in a much better position to be able to sell it to somebody else if you were forced to. And Traction by Gino Wickman. Now, cool little fun fact is our friend Jennifer here from Orvik, her previous company she worked for was the publishing company behind a couple of those books there, Traction and Built to Sell by John Warrillow. And those books absolutely changed my life. So if you haven't read them yet, go and change them. Right, commitment time. Whenever I'm working with any of my tech tribe, I try and get people to commit to things. And so I want some of you guys and girls to make a commitment here. So here's your commitment. So you can deliver an even better, amazing, world-class service to your clients, you're going to commit, or I will commit to sitting with my team, or if it's just you, if you're just a one-man band, that's perfectly cool. Sitting with me somewhere away from your desk, go to a local cafe or do whatever it is, or go to your boardroom, or go and take your team out for lunch, or even just hire a boardroom in the local area and go and sit with them before next week, before Wednesday next week, and commit to kickstarting your SOP version 2.0 journey. So you've probably got some stuff now. Make a line in the sand and say, okay, from now onwards, the rest of 2018, we're going to start a new SOP journey. We're going to start a new documentation journey. And we're going to really work on this foundation of our business to be able to become great at what we do and to be able to do what we all want to do. And that's deliver an amazing world-class experience to our clients. So if you are going to commit with us, a bit of interaction, just bring it on into the chat box, just so I can see if anybody is going to be brave enough to commit and say that we're going to work on our SOPs. We're going to take them to the next level. Cool. We've got some people already doing it. Well done. Bring it on. Amy and Nathan, more tech tribes. Welcome. David, welcome. I can see a whole pile of tech tribes in here. Very good. Cool. Excellent. So you guys have got some people doing it. Tony's already done it because we've already been through this with him. Excellent. Well done. That's great. I love hearing that. So we are going to start the Q&A, and I think I'm okay for time, which is cool. I did run through that a little bit. I hope you could all keep up with my crazy Aussie accent. So we're going to start a bit of Q&A in 5 minutes time. And Patrick is going to help me out, try and figure out what questions we've got asked in there. If anybody has got a question, I actually think using Zoom, there is a little Q&A section in there. Instead of typing your question in the chat, go and type your question in the Q&A section, because I believe it's a little bit easier for Patrick to be able to answer or figure out in there. Next up, so we've got a whole pile of you. Well done. I highly encourage you all to have that meeting by Wednesday next week with your team or with yourself. Sit down and say, guys, we're drawing a line in the sand. On the other line of the sand is our commitment to moving forward with a new SOP and a new SOP culture in our business and a new documentation culture. And the reason why, as I said, is we just want to create that amazing, great quality, world-class service with our clients. So to finish up, we've got a couple more slides to go, but I just want to ask you, what's your number one biggest takeaway that I've run through today? Post it in the chat. What's the one thing that's going to plant you a money tree now that might be a $1 bill today, but in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, you can see it as a $1,000 bill. What is your number one biggest takeaway? And throw them in the chat box there. I'd love to hear a few of you. And what Doc Smash sessions. Well done, Eric. You've got to do your Doc Smash sessions over in Hawaii so you can get across there a little bit more. Guy needs to hire someone, just has to be done. Start now and don't wait. 100% Tony, start now, don't wait. Keep it simple. 95 rule, KIFSS. Using video, get it out of your head. Yeah, very good. The importance of committed Kaizen. That Kaizen is, that was one of the foundational things in our business. And I'm a firm believer that any great business, it's not built by becoming a great business on day one. It's built by slowly, incrementally improving into a great business. And that whole Kaizen theory is what it's all about. Cool. Daniel, getting your team on board instead of trying to do it yourself. Culture, absolutely, Jay. Paul, repeatable processes. Eric, worry about the basic content, not the tools. 100%. Don't be me. Don't be me. Asking why. Randy, very good. And Connor, to stop being the only documentation guy, so important. It is so important. Get your team helping you. And they're going to make mistakes. Don't be discouraged when they make mistakes. Support them. Let them make mistakes. Be comfortable making mistakes, because if they make mistakes and they learn the lesson, that's unreal. That's you. That's them taking a little bit step further up into things that you're not going to have to worry about. Cool. We have got a pile here. Paul is planning a money tree. Marcus is getting business out of his brain. Welcome, Marcus, another tech triber. Tony, need to give Confluence a name. Brains. Yeah, very good. Tony, another tech triber. David, don't face plant before. Absolutely. 100%. Cool. So I promised at the beginning that I would let you know what's the most asked question that I get asked. And it is quite simply this. How do I price my MSP agreements? Now, for you guys in the Tech Tribe, you've already got this. However, for you not in the Tech Tribe, I've created a calculator called the MSP pricing calculator. If you want to go and grab it to be able to help you price your MSP agreements, just head to thetechtribe.com/calculator. Actually, sorry, that's the wrong URL. I think it's the-pricing-calculator. However, I'm going to go and put up a little quick thing in the next 10, 15 minutes that will forward that calculator. Once we finish this thing, I actually think that we didn't get the URL on there. And that's when I talked right at the beginning about hammering a screw in. This is me hammering a screw in. I forgot to get the redirect put in there. So the techtribe.com/calculator will work by, let's say, 10:30 a.m. Australian time. It will be working. And if you go there, you'll be able to download the pricing calculator that I used in my MSP, or a similar kind of derivative of it. This one is a vastly improved one. To be able to do it. And Tech Tribe, guys, you guys already have access to it, so don't worry about going and downloading it. It's inside the portal. Now, Patrick, did you want to chime in on this one? If you are here, Orvik have got a super special deal. Got to do your special deal right at the very end.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been great. So as I mentioned earlier, kind of gave you a bit of an intro as to what Avik does. Strongly suggest booking a demo. You can go if you go to avik.com/SOP, which is a specific sign-up page specifically based for this event. You'll get a $5 Starbucks gift card, and we'll give you a full thorough demo of kind of what the Avik solution does. And I'll talk a little bit more into it when we actually get into some of the questions here too. It kind of ties into a couple of good pieces.
Cool. Very good. And so that means you can drink your skinny Frappuccino caramel mocha latte whilst they're showing you a demo of what Orvik does. Very good. So I got a little bit of love. The Auvik guys said that I can promote on this webinar as well. So here is my 2 slides of promotion to show you a little bit about what we do. So I run a community called the Tech Tribe. A lot of Tech Tribers are actually on this webinar, which is cool. Inside we've got training, supportive, like a community where I hang out and I answer lots of questions. I do some private coaching in there. We have live masterminds, kind of like what we've done here. We've got a pile of templates, things like managed service agreement templates and proposal templates and business continuity plans and things like that, that you can download and tweak and adjust to use in your MSP. And if you want to go and give it a test drive, I've got a Friends of Auvik special for you. Head to thetechtribe.com/Auvik. And instead of paying $49 for your first month, you can join for $29 for your first month. Sorry, existing Tech Tribe members that are already joined before this offer. You guys are already in there. So you guys have had hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of value already. So I can't give you a special offer on here, unfortunately. Sorry, Eric. But if you want to take a look at what we're about, head to thetechtribe.com/Auvik. Would love to maybe have you as part of our Tech Tribe one day. And that's it from me. There's those 2 URLs, and I'm going to hand over to you, Patrick, to dive into a little bit of Q&A for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. We got a lot of awesome questions here, and actually quite a few comments towards the end when I think some of your members saw your price. They all came back and said, worth every cent, not a problem. So it's pretty awesome.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. I'll go and I'll send you your commission checks in the mail as soon as
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment one quick thing, or maybe 2 quick things before we get into the questions. As you're kind of going through and talking about Kaizen, I think there's a lot of activity around that. And I think that's a phenomenal way to jump in and instill a great culture of not just SOPs and documentation, but overall just improving the thought process and improving things step by step. Just really quickly, I read 2 awesome books. As we're talking about books, I'm obsessed with books. 2 awesome books on the topic of Kaizen. I can post them in the chat later, but one was on the one small step can change your life, the Kaizen way, and creating a Kaizen culture. I'll post those links in later too. Awesome books.
Cool.
And kind of my last point before we get into Q&A is I think once you have your 1,000 SOPs, you're sitting on literally a gold mine of opportunities. Obviously you talked great about, having the improvements that you made to your business. But I think you're also sitting on a gold mine because that is really your list of items that you can work on optimizing and automating. I've done a lot of webinars on automation and, how to improve and how to scale your business. And everyone comes back and says, I don't know what to automate. Your SOP list is a phenomenal starting point to understand where you can actually automate and where can make the biggest bang for your buck.
Correct.
So, all right, I just wanted to jump in and mention that.
Cool. Very good. I can see some of these questions in here. Did you want me to run through them?
Yeah. So I've got, I've started compiling a bit of a list. I think we've got quite a few really good ones here. So I think I'd start with, a lot of people requested, a bit more detail on your first SOP, your SOP to write an SOP.
Okay.
A few people asked to say, hey, are you willing to share that, or kind of what does that look like? Because I think that people want to get started, and that's a good starting point.
Now that original SOP in my business got sold with the business along with the other 1,000 SOPs, and I don't have it anymore. And I couldn't give it to you, unfortunately, if I wanted to, because it's not mine. I sold it as part of the IP in the other business. However, it was extremely simple. It was less than a page, and it was simply to create an SOP. Number 1, choose the area that it goes in. And it maybe had a couple of lines about how to choose a particular area. Number 2, write a quick paragraph about what the why is. Number 3, there was some formatting things in there around how we should format. So if we're ever doing a quote, it needs to go in a quote box. If we're ever doing that, it goes in something else. And number 4, one of the last things in there was just get someone to peer review, just look over your shoulder and just have a quick 30-second look at it before you save it. And it was quite simply something as simple as that. It wasn't anything complex. And so even if I was to give it to you, you'd go, oh, that's kind of simple. Because it is simple. It's nothing more than that. Don't make it complex. Make it super, super, super simple so that your team look at it and don't go, oh, I've got to do all these 27 steps to create an SOP. Have 5 steps. After they've done it 10 times, they probably don't need to read those 5 steps anymore because they know how to do it.
Fair enough.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So another good question I saw from Eric is, what is a process that's too small to document?
Love this question. There is no process too small to document in your business. Or there probably is. I didn't come across it. But in our business, we even had so even when we sold products, so in the sales side of our business, one of the things that we did was we sold product. We sold monitors and switches and routers and whatnot. We even had an SOP for every single type of equipment that we sold. So say we were selling a monitor, for instance, we had an SOP for how a monitor should be quoted and laid out on our QuoteWorks. We had to import them all into QuoteWorks. So every single time our admin team would sell a new monitor that we'd never sold before, there was an SOP for how to add that monitor into our QuoteWorks system or our quoting system so that it displayed the exact same way as every single other one. Now that SOP was only 6 lines. It said, if selling a new monitor or if adding a new monitor into our quoting system, this is the framework to follow. And it just said how the title should be displayed, the size, size, whether it had Visa mounting, yes or no. And it just was literally 6 lines and that was it. It was as simple as that. And that can be an SOP. Personally, I've got an SOP for how I order my t-shirts just because I won't lie. I used to have an assistant when I ran my MSP, my executive assistant used to order my clothes for me through one of my SOPs. And that's probably on the crazy end of the scale. And I don't recommend you all go and do that. I probably am a little bit on the spectrum there, but I actually do have an SOP for how to order shirts, what the part number is for them and how to order them and how to send the purchase order across to the people so that every time I need a new 5 shirts, because I only wear the same shirt, same type of shirt every single day. It's either a black collared shirt or a black normal shirt. And I've got that documented out. So honestly, there is no process too small. I'm sure there is somewhere where you draw the line, but that was my line. Even processes that small.
Okay, fair enough. And a question we got quite a few times in here is, how do I deal with the situation where my customers' needs, are very, very different from each other? Do I create one, for each specific customer, or how do I build that to scale?
Super good question. So in all of your SOPs in your business, let's use rolling out a new PC as an example, because that's a very, very common one in us as MSPs. So in our business, we used to have the Vision 3 way or our MSP way of rolling out a new PC. And that was a checklist of 35 steps or whatever it was that had that chocolate stuff and whatever it was in there. But then in the client section, we also had what are the extra 15 steps that particular client has to add on top of our system. And that would be installing their line of business apps and making sure their shared calendar works this way because that's the way they always want it to work and whatnot. And so we started with when I talk about going and prioritizing what SOPs to focus on first, focus on the big one first. It's going to get you the most bang for your buck. So the one that where you're rolling it out to all of your clients and it can benefit all of your clients. And then start to create these little ancillary ones, which are customized for your client that plug into it. And that first step of that particular custom client one would be go and run the Vision 3 or the My MSP new computer installation checklist. Go and run that first. And then step 2 would be install this line of business app. Step 3 would be set up the shared calendar. Step 4 would be whatever that particular client needed for those custom things. And that's how we did SOPs in there. Using tools like IT Glue and whatnot, a lot of that, like the documentation in terms of how things are set up, like configuration types and how your routers are set up and IP addressing and all that kind of stuff, that absolutely should be done on a per client basis inside your IT Glue or inside your configuration types, inside your PSA or whatever it is that you use. They should be done in there. And there's no two ways about it. That's one of the downsides to our industry is that there is lots of complexity and every client does things in different ways. However, one of the other things that I teach our tech tribe about is standardizing the absolute crap out of everything that you do so that across all of your clients, you've hopefully only got one type of router and one type of computer and one type of antivirus and one type of everything. So that makes that job, even though it does exist that we have to have all this custom stuff out there, at least if we've got a standardized service catalog out there of all these things, it means it at least makes that job a little bit easier. I'm not going to say it's not a hard job. It is a hard job to go and do it, but that's unfortunately part of our industry. And unless you have every single client exactly the same, which let's face it, that's hardly ever going to happen, then you've got to do this. So make it easy on yourself by setting a service catalog.
Okay. So another interesting one, and it's very, very similar along the lines of automation, is how do you convince your team to get really involved in creating SOPs where you can actually make them feel expendable?
Yeah. How do you make them not feel like monkeys?
Exactly.
That book, The Checklist Manifesto, goes very deep into that. And so the biggest thing that did it for our team was that I always talked about what it does is it doesn't turn us into monkeys. It frees us up to do the fun stuff, to do the cool stuff. And it gets the basic stuff that we're trying to remember in our heads, honestly, is the stuff that is not fun when it comes down to it. Rolling out a new PC with 25 steps, that's not a fun thing to keep in your head. But figuring out and freeing all that brain space up to be able to go and work on higher level things in our business, that actually is fun, especially if you've got the right team members that want to do that. If you've got team members that don't want to do, they don't like thinking at that higher level and they like this structure and everything has to be done that way, that's okay. Maybe those team members just need to be in positions where they just have to follow processes. And I'm not saying that every single person in your business has to be someone that goes and improves and documents all the time, but reality is it might not be the case. So some people might be the type of people that just need to follow them. Some will be the type that need to improve them. And you need to just try and figure out that balance and what works for you. Does that make sense?
And I think just to add to that, I think every company has a mixture of both of those types of individuals, right?
Correct, yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's that's a good point.
Yeah. But the people that, so sorry, I was just going to reiterate, the people that are at the higher level and are doing the big things and the good things, that are worried about becoming monkeys or being felt like they're monkeys, paint them the vision of the future where they can focus on fun stuff, where they can get all that crap out of their brains and they can focus on some bigger picture stuff. You're not going to get rid of their job. You're going to make their job more interesting for them.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll probably continue for another 4 or 5 minutes here. We've got a couple of questions left. A few people actually asked the question around how do you deal with situations where you have both, on site, like your own staff, but you're also supplementing your staff with with an outsourcer.
Yep.
How do you handle that? How do you, what's your thoughts or best practices for creating content one for the other, or, sharing that content?
Yeah. Another good question. Always the hard ones. So that one, there's a lot of outsourcing companies out there, like Outsource Knox and whatnot. A lot of those companies, like you as an MSP, you're going to create your way of doing things, your ideal way, and your processes and your checklists and your guides and your way of looking after your clients. And most relationships with an outsourced company probably should be following your way of doing things, especially if you're kind of detail oriented, which a lot of us, quite frankly, are. You should be creating all those processes and whatnot, and then handing those back-end things. And a lot of these are back-end or maybe level 1, level 2 tech stuff. They're typically not the higher level productizing kind of stuff. But if you're creating all of those things, then your outsourced team typically should be just following them the majority of the time. And depending on how you've got the structure set up and depending on the outsourced team, you can maybe have them provide some input here and there. But you just have to be a little bit more careful because those outsourced teams, they work in different ways to you running your own internal team. So you got to kind of figure out where your line is drawn. And some people draw the line where they hand the entire part of their service delivery across to their outsourced team. And teams like Continuum and Benchmark 365 and those kind of really cool companies, they allow you to kind of take a step back from your service delivery a little bit, and means that you don't have to do that stuff. But then you've got to make the decision as to whether you're happy that the stuff that they're rolling out for your clients is the kind of quality and level that you want them to. And you just got to make those decisions. That's different in every single MSP, and you've got to figure out where your line is drawn and where the balance is. But typically you're going to have to create them yourself and come up with your way, because that's what's going to set you apart from everyone else. And those outsourced companies, they're not going to want to set you apart from anybody else, because that's not what they're about. They're about just providing you underlying support. You are who should be setting yourself apart from everybody else out there.
Okay, awesome.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I think we'll go for a couple more. If we do end up running out of time, what we can always reach out to those of you that have some unanswered questions afterwards, and send you a quick email as well.
Or come and join the Tech Tribe and ask me in there. Sorry.
Fair enough. So I think there's a lot of questions around just the general start of how do I get started, and I think you talked about that a little bit. I think some people might be looking for a bit more guidance for, after you've created your first SOP, are there any kind of quick start guides, or, what can you start with that will get people excited?
Get them in that room and solve the problem in the room. That honestly is what got our team excited. They weren't excited up until we got them in a room. And because in our businesses, all of our people are epic problem solvers. It's why they do what they do, because they want to solve problems. That's why most techs and most of us do what we do, because we love the challenge of solving a big curly problem. And so if you get your team in a room and you outline the problem to them and you say, guys, you guys are epic problem solvers. So instead of me barking an order at you about how we're going to solve this, I want you guys to help solve it because you guys are amazing problem solvers. And I had this conversation last week with one of our tech tribe, or 2 weeks ago with one of our tech tribe, and he went out and did it. And he pulled his team into the room and said, okay, we've got this problem. We're crap at documentation or whatever it was. Our documentation is just not where we should be. Let's solve this as a team. And he said he was blown away by the kind of conversations that were had and the ideas that people had and whatnot. So that's my advice there, is get them in the room. That the biggest bit to get your people involved and excited and thinking about it and whatnot is to help them solve the problem. They will be excited about the solution if they've solved the problem.
Right, and I think tying back into Simon's book, start with why. If they understand the why and they're bought into the why, that'll drive passion in itself.
Yeah, 100%.
All right,
so just start. You can improve it later.
Yeah, exactly. There's quite a few chat messages coming in. Just start, just get it started, and that's part of the whole Kaizen philosophy is small improvements over time.
Correct.
Don't completely reinvent everything. It's just start it and improve yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think we're probably running out of time. I think one last question I think I'd love to get to is the concept of change management. Is there a point where you'd recommend getting into change management and kind of what's the trigger, and do you recommend it, first of all, yes or no? But what's the trigger and what's that point in your growth that you think it's necessary? If
that is hard, and that's kind of where I touched on before about that security, where you draw the line with security kind of SOPs and how that works. And as you grow into a bigger MSP, you will have to start putting in change management things. And that can start off with just a peer review process. It can start off with just a peer review or a manager review process in there. But eventually, as you get to maybe a 30, 40, 50, 60 seat MSP or larger, that's when you're going to have to implement some change management things. And that does come with its own set of problems and challenges and advantages. But for me, my encouragement is in the smaller stuff, in the 5, 10, 15, 20 seat MSPs, kind of in the small realm. You typically don't need change management much in there, apart from just being able to audit back through your things. The change management at that level is honestly just hire the right people. Don't focus too much on technology and tools and whatever to manage it. Focus on getting the right people in the right roles that are going to make the right decisions so that you don't have to worry about putting change management in at a smaller level like that. And it's hard to answer where the time comes as to when you should start implementing those things, because every MSP is different. Every business owner is different. Everyone has different expectations. You've got different clients that you service. If you're servicing financial markets, you're going to probably have to implement some of that stuff earlier. If you're servicing restaurants and yoga studios, for instance, you can probably get a little bit further away before you have to start implementing it. But you do have to take that into account 100%, and you've got to figure out where your balance lies and what people can edit, improve, and update, and what they can't. And you do have to start taking that into account. I can't give you the direct answer though, because there is no direct answer. It's different for every one of you. Just make sure that you keep it in your mind.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up with that. There are a couple of questions that are left outstanding, and we can always reach out afterwards.
Okay.
But anyways, really, really appreciate everyone's time. I understand, this is a good chunk of your day. But I think this is such an important topic to me and obviously Nigel. And lastly, Nigel, thanks a ton. This has been fantastic.
No problem.
And I wish I were, living or being able to go to the beach in Australia really soon. But
come and visit. I might go out for a swim right now if you can hurry up.
That's twice in a couple hours.
It is. That's why I live on the beach, so I can do it. I've got a friend, just to finish off, I've got a friend who works in business, and he's got this thing called his SWT ratio. And what it is that as he goes through his workday, he's got a certain amount of his swimming, his working, and his tacos that he's got to go through. So he's got his swim work taco ratio. And he has a swim, does a bit of work, has some tacos, has a swim, does a little bit of work, has some tacos.
Awesome. That sounds like Breakage and can do some good dashboarding on.
Cool. Excellent. And Art has just asked, is there a better link for the calculator? As I said, it should be by 10:30. I will make sure the techtribe.com/calculator works for you.
Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and close it off. So we'll be just dropping off here. Again, thanks everyone. And thanks
everyone.
Especially Nigel.
Make sure you follow through on that commitment.
All right, cheers.